my role is to try to give some direction on the, not direction on discussion, but to set the scene for the discussion about resilience, design, sustainability, and what we can do for that. So I think that the first point is to say something about resilience. This term is now very often used, and probably you know very clearly, very scientifically what is resilience, but for the few of you that maybe do not know it, I would like to say something, because sometimes, you know, the words, when they become very successful, they are stretched in all the direction, and at a certain point, in some way, they lost the meaning. So resilience is a very important word in my view. It's a word that is in the scientific world, it's there since a long time. Maybe you know, maybe not, the beginning of the story of resilience has nothing to do with sustainability, it has to do with material. So a material, in the science of material, is resilient when it's capable to accept some stress without breaking. So rubber, some plastic are resilient, as opposed to what is fragile, as glass, crystal, certain metals, that they are very hard, but also very fragile. So what is the relationship between this idea of resilience in the science of material and resilience in the way that we are talking here? Is that at a certain point we started to shift from the traditional idea of resilience linked to the material to what is the shape and the architecture of the systems. And so given that we live in a very complex socio-technical system, we can talk about if this system is resilient or not. And it means if the system is capable to accept stress without collapsing. So this is where we are. I want always to say that even if we talk a lot about resilience when we talk about sustainability, it's not said that resilience is equal to sustainability. But in my view, and I will try to show it, resilience is a precondition for sustainability. So whatever we can imagine to be a future sustainable society, a future sustainable society is a society that has to be lasting time, and it has lasting time in a period that is full of unforeseeable events, big or small disaster, political and problems, terrorism, war. Everything can happen in a risky society, as a sociologue, a German sociologue, defined it some years ago. So if we want to have a society that lasts in time and be sustainable, hopefully, it has to be resilient, capable to pass through all these kind of problems that can happen. Whatever I'm saying now is not new. It's something that who was in this area knew since a long time. But now the term emerged. So in some way it moved from the very tight community of the scientists to a very general public. What happens? Why it became so popular? I'm sure that you know this image. It's one of the many that I could use, but this one in my view is particularly emblematic, also because we are in the second anniversary of when it happened. So it happened that in Japan, that is a very well-organized country, as we all know. They are perfect technologically. They are capable to create technological system that works very well. And at a certain point, they had an earthquake, they had a tsunami. But what is interesting, this is a natural event that can happen, but this natural event creates something that breaks down the overall system of this very mature, very well-effective socio-technical organization that is Japan. So at once people recognized that those systems are fragile. And I like this image because you see people looking at the TV. That means that you see here 3, 4 people, but there have been 3, 4 billion people, maybe more, that all together was looking to this show. That was a reality show, unfortunately, in which such a technological power was crashing down because it happened something. So this has been the beginning, in my view, of the very large recognition that our system, even if they are so sophisticated, even if they are so technologically advanced, have a problem. Something can happen and they can collapse. And here we have the idea of the opposite of fragility, brittle, that is resilience, that appear as one of the main important points. So now if we move from this very general recognition of resilience to the idea of what the scientist says about what is a resilient system, we know very well scientifically what is a resilient system. Of course, it's a long story, but I can make it very, very short. If you look to the centralized system on your left, this is a very fragile system. Why? It's obvious to everybody, because all the dots where are we living our lives, doing our work, producing our production, everything depends from one point. And if something happens in that point, everything collapses. So the centralized hierarchical vertical system could appear to be very effective, but as a matter of fact, they are highly fragile. And we can say that all the last century organization, in the name of a certain idea of effectiveness, has progressively moved the overall socio-technical system in which we live toward that direction. So that direction, to have a center that is supposed to have the capability to control everything, has been seen as the solution for the problem. The idea of economy of scale, the idea of the bigger the best, all this idea was pushing in this direction, and we create a apparently very effective system, and as a matter of fact, a very, very fragile one. Now, to be short, if we shift from the left to the right ones, you see this one. This one, nowadays, luckily for all of you, all of us, except here that we don't have Wi-Fi, but in general, outside from this place, it's a very well-known image. And it's an image that represents a very big success story of the last decades. So finally, we are now in the age of the networks. And we talk about the information networks. And we talk about internet. And we talk about everything is related to that. And this internet, as everybody of you know, and probably many of you know much better than me, it's very intrinsically resilient. Why the system is resilient? It's resilient because, of course, in the human things, problem can happen. Of course, disaster can happen. Of course, terrorism can happen. But they can hit one of those points, one of those nodes. And if they do not hit all the nodes, that is very improbable, the remaining part has said a kind of redundancy, so the overall system do not collapse. And this is why, in general, the more that you move toward a redundant means that the nodes are connected with several links. Redundant systems, the more you have redundancy, the more the system is resilient. So if our society will be wise, and this is not said, unfortunately, we should move from centralized pseudo-efficient system toward a distributed system, networked system, because this is not, as I said before, the condition, the only condition for sustainability, but it's a precondition to give the opportunity to our system to last in time for a long, long period, as we hope. So here we are. This issue about having resilient system is a utopia. Is already here. Are we going in the right direction? This is a discussion that we can have. What I will try to show you is that the reality, as always, and luckily, is very complex. And so there is no one answer. Depending on how we look at it, we can say something is moving objectively in that direction. Something is not. There is a kind of clash in between two different ideas. I would say the old dinosaurs of the past are still there and they don't want to die. And the new creature of the new are already there and they try to have their future. So they are hopeful monsters, as somebody said. So we are here, I think, to give more hope to the hopeful monsters, so to the new things that are appearing. That is not given, so nothing is deterministic. It's not said that what I'm going to say now, because I am a designer, so I try to bet on the positive side. So it's not given that will happen, but it's in the sphere of the design issue. The design issue are the ones that can happen if we do something. So design issues are not utopia, only a dream or something that can happen. You have to show that there are some possibility if we do something. And, okay, this has already been said. So we have to try to move to reorganize the system in the way that it could be the most that is possible distributed, organized in a resilient way. So I will talk about three different keywords, three different statements: distributed system, collaboration, and new qualities, that represent three facets of the same thing. One is more related to the technological innovation, one is more related to the social innovation, and one is more related to the cultural innovation. I will say something about that. In the reality, we are in an old system that is very big, very complex. It's a social-technical system that integrated to the natural system is our habitat. So it's one, and it's all is connected. But as human beings, if we want to face and we want to start a discussion, sometimes conscious that is one, we have to look by different point of view because there are different sides that can move with different speed, with different problems. So even if I advise you that the reality is one, I will talk more by the point of view of the technology, and afterward by the point of view of the society, and afterward by the point of view of the culture, considering that the three are three facets of the same thing. So let's start from the technological side, distributed systems. Where are we for the distributed system? I will say we are not so bad. What does it mean, distributed system? It means there is a definition, are network built by a variety of small-scale interconnected elements. And we can imagine to rebuild the overall system of production and consumption and infrastructure with this principle. And as you know, as I was joking before, outside this room, no, I'm joking, in our society, we have at least one side of this technological innovation that is already there. More than that, it's the biggest success story of technology of the last 40 years. And it's the moving from vertical system for information technology. When I was young, they were a big mainframe, and you had to go with your request to some places, a kind of cathedral, where they organize the data for you, toward what is normal today. So it's very important to say that, because it's far from being perfect, but it shows that we are very far from talking about utopias. We are talking about something that has already been good. Yes. I'm wondering how to translate my Italian English in this language. It's very good. So, no, this is important. when we talk distributed system, we are already partly in the distributed system and not in a marginal part of our life, because information is our system that creates information in our society, in our body. So it's really very important. Power generation. I'm sure that all you know that we have 100% of the technology that is needed to have a distributed system for what regards power generation. Every house, and in the near future, every car can be a power station. And so we can shift away from the big monster and move towards something that is distributed in the same way that through the internet, through the distributed computing, we move from the mainframes toward distribution. So we have all the possibility already now, technologically, to move from the mainframe, the big power station, nuclear, carbon, etc., toward the distributed production, in which, in the same way that each one of us have our computer, we could have in a house. Each house is a place where you produce and you consume energy, you exchange energy in between the different nodes. Why do it not happen? But this is complicated but very simple. The dinosaurs don't want to die, and this always happens. So there is a fight. It's a political, technological, economical, etc. But there are the forces. Today, it's a difference as 30, 40 years ago. The ones that talk about alternative energy are not anymore some hippies. There are, I'm only saying the same thing, but there are people that have their own business. They make it, so there is really an economical competition. I'm convinced that the big competition between America and China in the future will be around these green technologies. So, not is all gold what we see, but there is really something that is already on the way. And we have a lot to do to make it better. So maybe the discussion now is not so much on green technology per se, but it's which kind of green technology, how they are. In any case, for what regards energy, we are near. What about production? This is more tricky, and many of you are designers, and we are accustomed to this very awful, stupid system of production of our goods. So you take the material somewhere, you bring it in another place, and after you transform, you create a component, you bring the component in another place, you assemble a piece, you put it in a ship, you bring it in another place, you conclude your production, and you ship back your refrigerator in San Francisco. And the refrigerator, the piece of refrigerator had thousands and thousands of miles of transportation around the world. Why? We know why: the cost of work, the laws, the environmental issues, the low cost in transportation, etc., etc. But this is all out not only from an environmental, ethical point of view, but it's stupid. Because if you imagine an alien that comes and looks at how they produce things around in the world, they would say, but these 10 people that they have, they are really mad. So it's really stupid. And therefore, I think that it will happen. And it is happening. That in some way, there is a movement to recombine production and consumption. You want to have some example? Let's see some example. But there is a lot to be done. In this case, where I say, on the information technology is done. No, it's done. In any case, it's a success story. In the energy, it could be, it's here. In the production itself, a lot has to be done, but there are some examples. All the movements around agriculture, and this is very important to start from agriculture, because agriculture, for whoever deals with sustainability, knows that the agriculture has to be shifted toward being the center of the scene. So every discussion about zero-mile food, community-supported agriculture, what is the meaning? The meaning is that you try to bring back together nearby who produce and who consume. So we have a lot to do. What we see about agriculture and food today, it's only the beginning. This is a very important story. We see some very interesting signal of what is happening. And we try to imagine the society, and it's right. But what we see, it's only the beginning. It's for the designer, it's the first prototype of what could be a mature society. So the same kind of intensity of work that has been done to create the monster of the so-called industrialized agriculture, in which has been thousands of designers designing from the machine to the packaging to the distribution to the supermarket. We also designers, are working a lot of time designing and thinking to improve that system. There is equal quantity of work to be done to create a new kind of organic, seasonal, nearby produced agriculture and food. The issue about the agriculture in the city, I'm sure that many others will talk about this. It was something that you could laugh. If you talk about gardening in the city 30 years ago, people say, yeah, this is for the retired people that have nothing to do. Today there is a very serious discussion about the resilience of the city and the possibility. It's not a religion, so you have not to produce everything on your roof, but you have to, it's a direction. You have to try to produce near the consumption the more that you can. But we can make the same for manufacturing. And very interesting things are happening. Even if the direction has been toward big manufacturing, still today in the world, the majority of the production is done by small, medium-sized companies. So in the old view, the small companies was the remaining of the past. In the new view, the small company at the beginning of the future, or something that comes from the past that we can project in the future. So the rediscussion of how we can create cluster of micro and small company to create what we need is very open, and I know that there are maybe also in this room many designers that are working on how to create this recombination of many different small companies. And the same could be for craftsmanship. Craftsmanship is seen as remaining of the past, the maximum that we can say, well, sometimes they do something very nice, so it will be a very expensive element, but maybe not only that. Craftsmanship is still very diffused in the world, it's part of the variety of our culture. In the new vision of distributed production, it could be a very important element. And finally, here we are in California, so you know the movement of the makers, the movement of the Fab Lab. This movement, in my view, are very young, are very wild. What they do, personally, I find that they mainly do gadgets. But the idea that it's possible to make something in your garage and with high tech, it's really a kind of very strong hit on the idea that the future is only the big Toyota, Ford, etc. companies. So they are ingenious, in my view, in many ways, as every movement is young, but very interesting by our point of view. So they are starting to introduce new ideas. And at the end of the story, to have a resilience production system, we have to combine all that. Because as has been said in the introduction, and I totally agree, sustainability asks for resilience, and resilience asks for diversity. So diversity, to have different strategy of production and to have the coexistence of different strategy of production is the precondition to create a resilient system. So there is a lot to be done for designer starting from the technical point of view. Where is the board? I know, I am concerned to be hit by the board. It was soft in any case, no? Yeah. 2 minutes. 5 minutes, my God. Okay, I will do it. So, the second one is the social issue. It's very important. If you think the centralized technology, they can be imposed. If you have the army and if you have the police, you can clean a territory and put your bloody power station. But if you want to have that every house become a power station, you cannot have any policy or any army that could impose it. So the thing, and in my view is the good thing, of the distributed technology is that they ask for social participation. So you cannot have a technocratic imposition of distributed technologies. You need, for distributed technology, an equal social innovation. So there is not the distributed technology diffusion without social change. So now we can very quickly move to social change and say, what is the state of the art of social change? Is happening a social change that could be coherent with this transformation technology? Yes, and in the last period we have had a kind of wave of social invention. I will not pass through all these names, but I'm sure here especially you know all of them, or you have an idea of all of them. All of them are new form organizations that started by somebody that invented a new way to solve a problem. And this has been started in the society, not in the scientific and technological laboratory. And we can call altogether grassroots innovation. It's not new. Grassroots innovation always exists. But who studies social innovation knows that social innovation goes by waves. There are some motivation, as a technological innovation, by the way. So many people say that we are in a phase of a big wave, growing wave of social innovation. And this social innovation has some characteristics. Now, not only because I have 5 minutes, but I will not enter so much in this discussion, that, by the way, if you want, I will be happy to discuss afterward, because this is particularly my subject. But we can have different situations in Europe, in America, but also in South America, but we are again in Europe, we are in China. So there are some ideas that move around the world. And they are the ideas that have something in common. And what they have in common is that all those organizations, all this, what emerged from this grassroots organization, that is so diverse and spread all over the world. But they have one point in common. Oh no, they have more than one, but I want to say one point in common. That is, they are collaborative organizations. And this is especially for the Western one here. It's important because the stereotype of the people has been, we are moving, modernity means to move toward being individual, and individual move to be passive, waiting, having the money to buy the services. Now all these people are active and collaborative. So they break two main ideas that every marketing book is saying what is society. That people is there, sitting in the chair and waiting to be served. These people like to be active, to do, to make things happen, and to make them with others. There are a lot of motivation for that. There are a lot of ways to arrive to this, but it's a very common denominator, and it's a disruptive attitude in relation to the mainstream. So, what does it mean to design, instead of designing for passive individual people, to design for active communities? This is our challenge that I will not develop now. But when we talk about design for social innovation, at the end we design for collaboration. So, and the paradigmatic shift is to consider people not as individuals with needs, but as a group of people with capabilities. And as I imagine you understand, it's a quite big change in the way in which we work. And I like this phrase that comes from Amartya Sen, that in my view should be studied by all the students of design, that says, what we do, we work to permit people to be what they want to be and to do what they want to do. That means, me as designer, I do not pretend to know your needs. You are the only one that know the needs that you have. I only give you some tools, some platforms, some possibility to do what you want to do. And finally, 1 minute, and finally, this is in my view, for the designers in between you, the ones that are trained as designers, the most important point, the contribution the designer can do. Why people do it? We can say because it's convenient, yes. We can say because ethically they recognize that it's important, yes. But if you really look around and you find people that is starting to behave in a different way, and probably most of you also are starting, it's because people recognize something that in the new condition is for them better than the previous one. So they recognize a new set of qualities. So all that case generated are generating a disruptive set of qualities. So qualities that are breaking the traditional idea of qualities. For instance, the quality of relationships. That is the main reason why people normally shift to one of those kind of organizations. And what does it mean to design for good relationships? The issue about scale. Things are small, not because they are small because they're the beginning, but because if we are 15, we can deal having relationship, looking each other in the eyes. If we are 300, 3,000, it's a bureaucratic organization. So people choose relationships in which you can look to the other in the eyes and have real relationships. Time. People choose for slowing down a little bit, at least for in some moment. Why they do it? It's again for relationships. If you want to build a relationship, you have to take your time. You cannot have relationships, deep relationship in a very fast mode. And finally, work. People work and is happy. And this is disruptive toward the idea that people is happy only when they are in the free time, sitting in the chair and being happy. We are happy, I'm very happy sitting in the chair. But we are also happy, we are ourselves when we do something. So there is a strong movement toward rediscussing the value of work. And I would say to rediscussing the value of craftsmanship. Intended, as you know, this beautiful book of Richard Sennett that calls Craftsman, that explains very well an idea of work as craftsmanship, not only related to the traditional one, but also related to the contemporary. And I advise you to read it. Finally, the need to rediscover places, because our human being have a body and the body is in the place, and so we in some way are related to the places. And this is, I think, could be the end. So we design for new qualities, and I think that these qualities is the main design role. I put an interrogative mark, but for what I got myself, it's an exclamative mark. Thank you.